This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me to recap a disastrous loss for the Detroit Lions is my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Cuz, what's up? The Detroit Lions, they're sitting at 1-2. We got to break it all down in regards to a game in which they had 2 double-digit leads. I want to share with everybody kind of how I took it in because I had responsibilities trying to put out content, even though my fandom did come out. I've been doing a good job really trying to be as objective as possible, but I watched that game, and the way in which that game went down, by the time the fourth quarter hit and the mistakes started to pile up, the decision-making that Dan Campbell put out there, especially on fourth down, we're going to talk about it, I just had this awful feeling of dread, like, man, another game that the Lions missed out on. This football team should be 2-1. We should be celebrating. We should be happy. I should be coming on here, pushing record, making everything happen, and feeling good. Instead, it's carried over into my week. There's this general malaise where it just feels like, back to the grind, talking about moral victories, doing these podcasts that we've done 1,000 times. It just makes it so that you're not sharp. It makes it so that it's just like we've done this before, breaking down mistakes. Why can't they learn to put away games? I'm struggling. It's Wednesday, and I'm still feeling the impact of this loss because I can feel this football team, the opportunity that they just lost. You're going to play a Seahawks team that you're better than. You're going to play a Patriots team that's going to be without their quarterback. I feel 4-1. I felt this football team deserved the victory. They played well in a lot of ways. But again, and we're going to talk all about it, the defense, Jared Goff, Dan Campbell, it just stinks because at the end of the day, when you look at the Detroit Lions, there are always ways in which they secure losses despite having a lot of good things that should, for most National Football League teams, result in victories. I am still, to this day on Wednesday evening, feeling it. I just don't understand how this football team lost that game, cuz.
Yeah, it was pretty frustrating to watch. I was watching the game with a couple of buddies, and one of my friends was like, I find Lions fans so funny because you guys get so hyped, but you know your team's going to blow this. And all of us Lions fans were like, wait, what are you talking about? Because we were rolling. We were rocking and rolling throughout the entire course of that game. And he said this around halftime. He's like, just wait, watch. You guys will end up blowing it. And sure as shit, the team ended up blowing it. They ended up blowing the game in what I would say was the final 7 minutes of that game. They ended up costing themselves, and they lost that game. And it was frustrating. This is a team that should be 2-1 at this point. You're 1-2. You had all the opportunity to be first in the NFC North. I know it's early, but you still had the opportunity to be first in the NFC North. Currently, you're sitting in fourth. It's just incredibly frustrating. And I think the most frustrating part about all of it is this game falls at Dan Campbell's feet. This is the second time this season Dan Campbell has done similar things that have cost this team games, has cost this team an opportunity to win a game. This is at least the third, fourth, maybe fifth time he's done it in the past 20 games that he's been a head coach. So you're not learning from your mistakes. And look, I love Dan Campbell. I like him a whole bunch. I think I want this to work. I want this to succeed because I think he's a good guy. I think this team plays for him. I think he's got the heartbeat and he's got the ear of this team. I want this to work so bad. But you're seeing similar mistakes. And it's not the first time. It's not the second time. It's not the third time. You've seen this multiple times from him, whether it's basically playing the gambler and going for it on fourth downs, and then in crunch time you're gonna play with a tight butt cheek, and you're not gonna roll the dice, or whether it's calling a timeout after the team completes a big pass that moves the ball down the field and gives them time to regroup. You did that against Baltimore last year. You did that earlier this year in the game against the Eagles, calling these ill-advised timeouts either before the game ends or before halftime and allowing that offense to set up. What are you doing? Like, learn from these mistakes. Hasn't learned yet. And that is frustrating. For me, this game, this loss, is Dan Campbell's fault. And depending on where you want to go with it, you can lay it at his feet for a multitude of issues in this game. And look, you can go back to right around the 7-minute mark where Minnesota ends up cutting the lead to 24-21, and the Lions get it. And look, they go for it on 4th and 1. If you want to argue that they should have kicked the field goal there, you can if you really want to. Totally up to you. They go for it on 4th and 1. I think Jamal Williams ended up missing the hole. I thought it was poorly blocked, and I thought he ended up missing the gap that did open up for him. And then, look, Lions show up. They stop the Vikings. They get the ball back. And then it's 4th and 4. 4th and 4. You've been going for it all game long. Now you want to try to kick a field goal? Now you want to? You've got less than 2 minutes left in the game. Minnesota has no more timeouts. You've gone for it all day long, and you basically completed 4th downs at a crazy clip. I think they were 4 for 6. And you're gonna end up passing it up, and you're gonna go for a field goal? Like, what are you doing? Pick up the 4 yards, end the game. Finish the game. Don't give them an opportunity. Instead, you try to kick a field goal. And look, you could have punted, you could have kicked the field goal, or you could have went for it. I think the smart move, and where I was at, because we went around the room where I was watching the game, and I had one buddy who said you should punt this. I myself thought they were a little bit too close to punt it, because if the ball goes in the end zone, they're getting the ball at the 25-yard line. I thought that you had to go for it. I there was no way you were going to kick a field goal in my estimation, because if you kick the field goal, they can come down, score a touchdown, and the game could be over. So what's the point of kicking a field goal? It didn't make any sense. On top of that, if you miss the field goal, you basically give them almost 10 yards, almost 10 free yards. You end up moving the ball out to like the 44-yard line. So why kick the field goal? It doesn't make sense. You should have went for it on 4th and 4 and tried to pick up the first down. It made no sense to me. His play calling, the way he changed it up at the last second, made absolutely no sense to me. You're going for it all game long, and then at the last minute, when the team really needs it, you want to play conservative? I didn't get it. Didn't make any sense to me. What were your thoughts going into basically the final 2 minutes there? I think it was like a minute 23, a minute 25, somewhere around there, where they had to make that call, whether it was the punt, kick the field goal, which they inevitably did, or go for it. Where were you at? What did you want?
See, here's the part that is just so frustrating is how could Dan Campbell pick the third worst option of the 3? It made no sense, and you brought it up. I mean, Austin Seibert, and we've talked about how the hell did he defeat Riley Patterson in regards to the kicking competition, because he was making those kicks. But I don't understand why these coaches choose hope over practicality all the time. Why did Dan Campbell, to try to get into his mind, why did he think that was going to be successful when Austin Seibert has never once in his life kicked a 54-yarder? Why do Lions coaches believe that all of a sudden their players are just going to become heroes for the organization? It never happens. And I think I am more this way, and that I tend to be more negative and operate from that perspective, like, okay, this is going to be really bad, so how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? But these coaches in the National Football League, they just believe everything that they do is going to be great. But when you look at this decision, you tell yourself, wait a minute, if he kicks it, we're only up by 6. My defense is shitty. We have a fucking terrible defense, one of the worst in the league. No, I can't do that. We're only up by 6. It's not a big enough lead. What's been going well for me? My offense. So that's the part that's so frustrating is Dan Campbell has chosen to be aggressive despite what anybody thinks. Yet when it's time to put your nuts on the table to be aggressive to win a football game, you make the wrong call. You shrivel up. And it's fascinating because he came out and again said that it's my mistake. I wish that I had not done that. It probably won't happen again. And I doubt that Dan Campbell will ever do this again. But I just am so frustrated that collectively, the Lions never put everything together. Fine. Okay, he makes the decision. They miss the field goal. Fine. The defense is now called upon to step it up. What do? Blown coverage. No pressure. What was the biggest goal that the defense had that you're spending hour upon hour upon hour in these meeting rooms focusing on? Pressure Kirk Cousins. Act like how you did against Carson Wentz. No pressure late. Kirk Cousins stands there and is able to deliver a football beautifully to a wide open wide receiver for the go-ahead touchdown. And that's what stinks, is because every single time that there's a mistake, it's so punitive, it's so disheartening, because you know once Seibert missed that field goal, it was a loss. The game was done. You knew the defense was never going to step up. They never make the late game interception. They never high step it and just pop Kirk Cousins in the ass and drop him to the ground. Aiden Hutchinson could have been the hero. Knock the football loose, secure the football. Instead, he's hurt. The defensive line's all hurt. And what happens? You lose one of your best players, and we'll talk about that in Tracy Walker. But it just stinks because...
How's that Charlie horse looking?
Yeah, it's just collectively because the Lions always feel like they have all the ingredients, they know what to do to cook, but they just forget the timer and burn the shit out of the food. And you're like, God damn, you had the perfect ingredients. You had the perfect recipe. You had the perfect mix. You had the bowl in there. All you had to do was pay attention and take the food out. No. Time in, time out. You undercook the food. You overcook the food. And you poison your fan base week in and week out. And I still can't get over it, despite how many times we talk about the Lions. I can't get over the fact that for the decade we've done this podcast, the Lions can never put it all together. And especially this year when you had that victory. You did enough. You earned that victory. But it strategically made no sense. Analytically, it made no sense. And just based on common sense, like you said, you kick if you miss the field goal, you give them 7 yards, precious yards. And then the biggest mistake is Dan Campbell continues to find ways to give the opponent an advantage by calling timeouts, because it makes no sense logically. Every time you do it, it's not like the defense comes out and then shines. They fuck up. It seems like maybe paralysis by analysis, that they get tight. Let the game play out. I would have operated so differently. I would have let the clock drain, milk the clock, put the pressure on them, assume that I don't care when Dan Campbell says, well, the reason I didn't milk the clock is because I wanted that extra possession. I don't want the extra possession. I want to win the football game. I want to assume that the worst. Assume, oh, Jared Goff, is he going to take the ball 60 yards and throw it into the end zone? He's done it once. He's not the king of comebacks. He's the king of playing from ahead and taking advantage of opportunities. So that's what's so frustrating, is the decisions make no sense. And the way that they explain it, they have the crazy part that bothers me when you go out to Allen Park and you drive out there is they have this great rationale for everything that they do. You know what? Yeah, you own up to the mistake, but when you're asked why you didn't milk the clock, maybe just once say, you know what, we should consider it. Just give us a bone. Stop trying to say, well, I tried to, make sure to ensure that, I keep my offense in rhythm and that we can have the ball back. That is just a manner in which I would say I want to put maximum pressure on your opponent to make it so that they have to march down the field and have to do it with 10 seconds left, and that be the final play. Stop worrying about, hey, we need an extra possession. And that's what's just ultimately frustrating, is it just never seems like the luck factor or the extra bounce or the scenario in which anything good happens for the Lions, it doesn't happen. Now we're looking at a 1-2 football team that has to win this weekend, and it's so disheartening. And I hate to hear that your friends, laugh at Lions fans, because we're sitting here struggling. It's impactful. We care. I'm supposed to not care, but I've tried over the last few months not to be that way. But this one got me, because I saw a football team that potentially could be 4-1 by the bye week.
And I think this is what's probably most frustrating for everybody, is after the game, you've got Dan Campbell going to the podium and basically saying, hey, I cost us this game. This game was lost because of me. If I could take back that play call and put it back in a box, I would in a heartbeat. And then you've got Jared Goff going and doing interviews, and after the game talking about how he wished he would have challenged the coach, would have said, give me the ball. I need the ball. Put the ball in my hands. This is something we talk about all the time. Winners want the ball at the end. Jared Goff is a guy who's looking for a contract. You want $35 million? You want $40 million? You got to prove that you're worth it. You better go demand the ball, and you better have a play in your back pocket to help this team win. Instead, you basically fold up like a bad set of cards on a table. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? To you, what was more damning? Was it the head coach coming out saying, "Hey, I cost this team this game," or was it the quarterback, the guy who is basically there for all of the install of the offense, the guy who basically sees all of the defensive fronts, a guy who can basically tell his head coach, "Hey, no, I want the ball. I want to stay on the field. Give me the damn ball. I'm going to go get 4 yards. I'm going to win this game for us." Is it that guy not doing those things and basically just cowering? Cowering is the best word I have for it. Is it him cowering and then coming out saying, "I didn't even have an idea of what we could have ran there," where you just watched a defense get picked apart, especially on 4th downs, all game long. You didn't have one play that you could have leaned on. I think they're both pretty damning, and kind of tell you a little bit about this organization, especially with the, I want to say, lack of star power on it, because I really do feel like Dan Campbell is the star of this football team, and he's your head coach.
Yeah.
What was more damning? Was it the quarterback coming out and saying that, or was it your head coach saying that?
See, to me, it just is a struggle, because why would Jared Goff come out and say that? Maybe you're trying to deflect all the heat from your head coach, but Dan Campbell can handle it. The part that was just frustrating is that not only did he say it Sunday, he goes on a radio interview a couple days later and says, "I didn't have any plays in my head that I could have ran." You're supposed to have 16 plays that you know could work on 4th and 4. What do you mean you didn't know? You you said it. The team was 4 of 6. You had great opportunities. You're supposed to be at a quarterback position, you're supposed to be such a far level advanced in the defense that you know if they do this, we're going to do this. You got to be 2 pieces ahead. That's what $30 million commands. What do you mean you didn't know? Nothing came to your mind? Not a play to T.J. Hockenson, Amon St. Brown, Quintez Cephas over the middle, a trick play, a draw play to try to surprise him? Nothing came to your mind? What do you mean you went blank? How does that happen? You can't go blank. That's not supposed to happen. You're supposed to take ownership of this football team. Stand out there and say, "No, we're not going to rely on some stupid kicker to win the football game." No. It bothers me, because once you come out and say it, now you put the onus that, hey, you could have taken ownership, and it makes sense. This football team has been catered to you. You said that you spent so much time with Ben Johnson watching film. This is your offense. It's the Rams' offense. They're cherry-picking the shit that you do well. Now when it comes down to going for it, you're just going to be like, well, whatever the coach wants. Fight a little bit. You said, hey, there was no problem for Dan Campbell to say, Jared walked into my office to play a preseason game. A preseason game. You nutted up for a preseason game?
I think that's the most frustrating part.
Yeah.
You've got no problem standing up to play in a preseason game, but you can't ask for the ball when it means the most.
Exactly. It makes no sense. I don't care about the preseason. I need to get you to the regular season when it counts. So it's so disappointing at the highest level that the Detroit Lions, it's just not highest level. You just know it's a young team, and there's a lot of things that can be better, but you know Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, who's fighting with his. Everyone saw it. Patrick Mahomes is damn near finger pointing and calling out Eric Bieniemy right there. It happens. You got to be more assertive. This California kid mentality cannot fly. I think he would have ingratiated himself to this fan base if he would have actually tried to execute it and actually done it. You win the game. Done. Signed, sealed, delivered. I think I'm more thinking about it, more mad at Jared Goff for not taking the reins of this football team, because Dan Campbell's got a lot going on, and he's trying to potentially, figure out a way in which a field goal gets him a victory. I think the crazy part would have been if the field goal goes good and you saw exactly what would have happened. Bro, what's happening with the defense? Because obviously 1A is the decision-making from Dan Campbell. What the hell's going on with this defense? I think some of the shine off of Aaron Glenn. I don't understand where this head coach thing is coming from. His defense has not shown that it's good enough to compete. It's not good enough consistently. Now, I know the defensive talent is not the best, but you're not devoid of talent. You put together a great game plan to limit Justin Jefferson, but then Aaron Thielen goes off. You were tasked with trying to pressure Kirk Cousins. You don't do it. Dalvin Cook, before he, hurt his shoulder and ran into his own guy, he was playing very well, and you were not stopping the run. So it's just up and down defense, and the mistakes are catastrophic where when you need this defense to step up, there's guys wide open. It makes no sense how this can be done where you say in any capacity that you trust the defense. I have no trust in that defense. It's so disheartening because you had John Kaminsky. You finally think you get a find general manager Brad Holmes, but now he gets hurt, and it completely disrupts your defense. You don't get as much pressure. Aiden Hutchinson, basically a ghost, nowhere near the stat sheet, and when it came down to it, you didn't do enough late in the game. You still could have won the game if you make a defensive play, and they failed to do it. And it's just so disheartening to see Amani Oruwariye not be able to pick up Jeff Okudah. It's always the yin and the yang. One part, and we've always talked about it. We've said it 1,000 times. It's like patching holes in a boat. Every time they patch up two, the third one is bigger. And you're like, damn, it just never feels like the boat is completely sealed and you're moving. It's just constantly patching holes. And the two that you seal, 3 more pop up. Jeff Okudah's playing great. You're giving him safety help. You put together a great opportunity. You need him on.
You shut down Justin Jefferson.
You shut down the guy.
Arguably one of the best wide receivers in the league.
You shut down the guy. And then the big holes is leaked. Amani Oruwariye is Mr. Grabby Pants and can't keep his hands off of Adam Thielen. Bro, it's disheartening because I like defense. I actually revel in watching the film defensively and looking at how you mismatch. It's just a game that it's a league that doesn't allow you. It's punitive to play defense. You can't put your hands on anybody.
Look,
it's tough.
This is what is so frustrating. We talk about Aaron Glenn possibly being a head coach caliber or a head coaching candidate. He's got the worst defense in the league right now. Defensively, they've given up the most points in the league. They are ranked dead last for points against. That is awful. Now, the offense is picking them up. The offense is tied for second in the league for most points for, but it's 31.7 to 31 points against. Like, you're not going to be able to win the majority of your football games doing that. You're just not. You have to be better on defense. There are, like you said, there are too many holes. And now you have to replace injured players. Like, you've got to find somebody to fill in for Tracy Walker. I think you and I disagree a little bit on the value of Tracy Walker. I think he's a pretty valuable piece back there as a safety. I don't know if KJ Osborne gets open, if Tracy Walker is back there and is able to play. I think he is a guy who can recognize what the offense is doing, and I think he can help get some guys into position. Now, I don't think he's a Pro Bowl. I don't think he's a guy who's going to basically make your defense, but I think he's a piece. I think he's a cog in the wheel. And he now goes down with a torn ACL. So now you've got to try to fill his spot, and you got to do it with guys who don't have that experience. So that doesn't help your defense at all. Like and look, the way this defense is built, let's talk about it. The way this defense is built is they've got to get pressure on the quarterback. Aiden Hutchinson, again, where is he? He looks like he's on the side of a milk carton because he's wanted. Everybody wants him to play and put pressure on a quarterback because he didn't do it in 2 of the last 3 games. Yeah, he had a really good game against Washington last week, but you know what? He didn't show up in the Eagles game. It's fine. You're a rookie. It's your first game. We'll give you a pass. You have a great breakout game against Washington. Cool. You got your feet wet. You're feeling good. Let's go. I get that you might be dealing with a bit of an injury, and the team wants to call it a Charlie horse. Charlie horse, my ass. It's not a Charlie horse. He's dealing with some type of thigh injury. It's probably a thigh contusion. All right? But still, you've got to be able to put pressure on a guy like Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins isn't a good quarterback. He's like the most average guy you'll ever meet in your entire life. And if he can't do it, you need other guys to be able to put pressure on that quarterback. That defensive line looks so weak. 0 pressure whatsoever. Whether it's a Liam McNeil, whether it's one of the Acquire brothers, whether it's whoever, somebody put pressure on the quarterback. Get to the quarterback. Make him feel it. Make him pay for sitting in the pocket. Alex Anzalone had the only sack, the one and only sack in that game. And when it took place, I was like, finally, somebody gets to the quarterback. This guy was back there roasting marshmallows and making s'mores for his entire offensive line the entire game. You've got to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. And you know what? If Aaron Glenn is a defensive guru, if he's this mastermind, figure out some other way to get other guys to get pressure on the quarterback. Figure it out. It's on you. That's your job. Do your job. Be better.
Yes, absolutely.
Defensively, this team is garbage.
What stinks is now the injury bug has just started to creep in, and everybody that gets a big contract is now going down. I didn't think Tracy Walker earned that contract. You look at Quandre Diggs, he's popping the ball out, making interceptions, always around the ball. Tracy Walker's starting to emerge as a playmaker, but and you give him credit for what he's done, but I don't think that his loss would have been spectacular if he would have went to another team. You drafted 2 young players, Ifeatu Melifonwu and Kirby Joseph. So you're developing young talent. You're trying to see what's going on, and now he's done. Frank Ragnow, DeAndre Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown goes down with injury. It just stinks that the Achilles injury that Jeff Okudah suffered, he had to miss an entire year. It just stinks that now anytime that a good player pops up, it's like, well, great. Now when Lee McNeil gets 2 sacks, the next week he's going to go out. It stinks that you can't rely on anybody to consistently perform because they're getting hurt. So now the injury bug is plaguing the Detroit Lions, and it's so frustrating when you look at this defense that they can never answer the bell. They can never, at the same time, put 2-3 games together. And it just stinks because, man, the defense might look good with a young second-rounder and Josh Paschal pressuring and peppering, getting through. Levi Onwuzurike getting out there on the field. He's still been missing now. And it just stinks because it's punitive. You can't just say, Brad Holmes, it was crazy. You can't just dismiss everything. He says, well, this was part of the plan. We knew Levi was going to be a slow deliverer. What do you mean? It's costing you games in real time. What are you talking about? Josh Paschal, well, we knew it, it's gonna take time. Look, you need the contributions now. Penei Sewell, right tackle, boom, locked in the game, best right tackle in the game. So you look at it, you look at what's going on, it just never fits. It just never works. And now, cuz, you know how important this week is against Seattle? You think you're just gonna roll in there and willy-nilly your way through DK Metcalf and Penny? Are you kidding me right now? Seattle might come in super hungry because of the fact that they're 1-2, looking to rebound after a couple-game losing streak. So it's not a given that the Lions are just going to step up on the field. I'm a little bit nervous now that this game coming up might be a game that could fit the bill of a game in which you lose. And you can't go into the game against New England on the road 1-3. This game is so massive. But the confidence that I have a little bit of confidence that obviously on paper the Lions are better than the Seahawks, at least offensively. Geno Smith versus Jared Goff, I think, is a complete, one-sided matchup in regards to the fact that Jared Goff is a much better quarterback than Geno Smith is. But I could see the Lions going out there and struggling mightily, being in a close game, and Seattle coming out and getting a victory because you saw it last year. Every single time they had a disheartening loss, the Lions got their ass kicked the next week. So this week is so important to turn things around. I just don't know where you look to because of the fact that everybody's assuming everybody that's a fan is just like, get them on the field. Look, Amon-Ra St. Brown, one wrong cut, if he steps on the foot of his of another receiver, he might be out. DeAndre Swift, look, he's been on the field, great, but you reduced his role. It just stinks because we're all hoping they get on the field, but bottom line, they're nicked up, they can't produce.
Look, you mentioned a couple of guys or a couple of players, and I think some of the things that Seattle does well, or the pieces that Seattle really has, a guy like Rashad Penny, a guy like DK Metcalf, a guy like Tyler Lockett, those guys are going to really test parts of this defense, and those guys are really good against parts of this defense which have struggled in the previous weeks. Run defense, not necessarily great. You can Jeff Okudah has played very well, but Amani Oruwariye, not so great last week. And the week before that, he wasn't on the field. And the week before that, he got abused a little bit. So, you've got prolific wide receivers, and you've got a really good running back here who can really take advantage of this defense. Now, offensively, I do think this offense is really, really good, but this has the makings going into this week. I mean, we are only in week 4, and this really feels like it's a must-win game for this team, because if they don't win this game, The season could start to spiral. You have a game that you had in your clutches, a game that you absolutely should have won, and whether it was the field goal kicker, whether it was your quarterback, whether it was your head coach, guys cost you this game. They cost you the game last week, and that was a game that you should have won. You can't get that back now. Now you're going to go into a game against Seattle. In this game, you have to win, because this was one of those games that when we looked at the schedule, we were like, yeah, they should totally win this game. This game was marked as a W. You had a chance at a big win last week. If you blow this win too, you're now staring at 1-3 headed to New England. And look, I know New England's banged up, and look, it's you can call it the grudge match with Matt Patricia, but New England does a great job of scheming with what they have, and they'll take advantage of you. They'll figure out what your weakness is, and they will exacerbate it, and they will show the entire league what is wrong. You need to win this game to help salvage this season, because going into New England and then heading into the bye week, you could be looking at a lot of trouble. It could be really, really, really bad for this team. So I think they have to get a win here, and then they can focus on New England. But if you go into the bye week and you're 1-5 at that point, 1-4 at that point, we've got to have a bit of a conversation here. You know what I'm saying? So I really do feel like this is a must-win game. Would you categorize this as a must-win game for this team?
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. I think right now the fan base is kind of sitting up to the table, their arms crossed, but they're not banging the drum just yet. But the fan base is nervous. The fan base wants to believe so much in Dan Campbell, but you can't help but look across the league. Miami's 3-0, cuz Miami with a new coach. You can't operate in a vacuum. You can't just sit there and say, well, it's a process. Nobody in their right mind wants to wait to year 4 for Dan Campbell to succeed. We want steady progress. We need to get to 6-7 wins. And if you start to go down the road of another loss to Seattle, there's no guarantee that you're going to outcoach Bill Belichick. You've done it before, but there's no guarantee that Hoyer doesn't just light you up, that Matt Patricia doesn't also have some competitive juices in his fat body that wants to dominate you. So you go into the bye week 1-4, and it's just completely off the rails. There's a lot of pressure. And it just always has a feel every week that the Lions have to just play super tight. That's what sucks, is when you have a young roster. And that's the part that's so frustrating with the way in which the Lions answer some questions. Is I asked Brad Holmes, do you have enough veteran leadership to execute late in games? And that was the key for me was, yeah, it's a young team. It's great. They play for you. You can mold this team in the manner in which you want. They'll go through the wall for Dan Campbell. But at the end of the day, when it's time, 3 minutes left in the game, who makes the play? Nobody. That's the problem. And now it could be Amon-Ra St. Brown. It could be DeAndre Swift. Could be TJ Hockenson if he ever steps up. But nobody consistently steps it up to where I say, okay, give it to that guy. Because you haven't seen it. You need a veteran. You need a dog. You need a guy that you say, okay, that young 27 to 29-year-old that just can, I'm giving that guy the ball. And you just don't
realize this? Do you realize this? We talk about it being a process, right? And like, oh, it's just part of the growing pains. This team has to go through this so it can learn to win and get better. Do you realize right now, I know we're 3 weeks into the season, but right now there are 3 teams that have gone from worst to first. Whether it be Jacksonville, who is leading the AFC South, whether it be Cleveland, who's leading the AFC North, or whether it's Miami leading the AFC East. Like, those are 3 teams that went from dead last in their division to now being at the very, very top. Like it can be done, guys. It can be done. Yes, there's a process, but you know what? You can expedite it by having a really good offseason and going out and getting some impactful free agents, or your guys actually doing what they're supposed to do, not having guys running into each other, not having guys taking plays off, not having a coach sabotaging the end of a game. You have the ability to go from worst to first. This league is set up for you to do that. There are other teams that have done that. And this team just seems like it wants to be stuck in mediocrity. I know it doesn't, but it just feels like it wants to be.
Yeah.
It sucks.
It sucks. It does. But you look at it, one more week, you potentially, you look at Wednesday, 10 players didn't practice. It feels like a country club. I know I don't want to talk like that, But 10, you can't. How do you get better? Nobody practices. Training camp is a wash. Everybody's just chilling. You just show up and everybody's happy. And 10 players don't show up, are not available for practice because of injury. And that is a way to prepare for Seattle. Oh my God. It's really tough. And it's nerve-wracking because Dan Campbell's been asked about it, what's going on with the injuries, and it's just been a struggle to pinpoint how to move this along. But I can't wait to see this game this weekend. I can't wait to see it because I'm not sure yet exactly what I'm rooting for. Personally, I want it to be a win, but the vitriol, I want to see what level of patience, because, throughout the course of the podcast, there's always been the underlying tension between the SOL crowd and the fanboys that are just whatever's the Lions do is all gravy and all Kool-Aid. So the Kool-Aid crowd versus the SOL crowd, I think, has kind of been deadlocked over the last couple weeks, and the SOL crowd kind of came back in full vitriol this last week because of Dan Campbell, but now the opportunity to get a win against a bad Seattle team. I'm curious to see how it shakes out. All right, we got about 9 minutes left. I wanted to brief a little bit. We just have to, because I know Adam just feels like every time Michigan State shits the bed, he's got to put it on the rundown. I'm very fascinated because I try to avoid that and say, hey, let's just talk about Michigan, how great JJ is. And Adam's like, no, that doesn't draw ratings. How shitty Scotty Hazelton is will be the best topic that we could talk about on this week's Detroit Sports Podcast. I'm like, okay,
Look,
fine.
I think that you have learned a little bit about Michigan State. I don't think we've learned really anything about Michigan.
Yeah.
Michigan has essentially played the Sisters of the Poor, and then they took on Maryland. And if you want something that I took out of the Michigan game, JJ's got to play a little bit better. He's got to be a little bit safer, not as loose with the ball, and the defense is going to need to step up a little bit, put some big boy pants on. As far as Michigan State goes, they've had 2 games now. 2 games where they looked like they have absolutely been abused, and that defense can't stop anybody. I told you earlier, I think the defense looks like it's a bit of a strainer when you're straining pasta because the water's just flowing through it. That secondary can't cover anybody. Yeah. The defensive line can't put any pressure on the quarterback. Conversely, MSU's offensive line just gets abused regularly. It's a bit of a mess right now. And look, you're the only Spartan fan I know. So I need to go to you to kind of get some insight as to what the hell is going on. Is it all Scotty Hazelton's fault? Or is this a bigger issue with Mel Tucker and his coaching staff?
Why am I subjected to Scotty Hazelton? They let the man talk in front of the media, and it just produced jokes galore. He's like, well, we're just so close to executing. The one thing that sucked, and I'm going to try to pull it up here real fast before our time is up, but Mel Tucker literally came out and said to the media, he's like, well, I know a lot of the concerns that, are causing a lot of issues, the defense to struggle. There's a lot of issues that we have. And you know what he named? He named damn near everything related to the game of football. Tackling, third down efficiency, scoring, stopping the opponent. I couldn't believe that Mel Tucker literally said that there are so many things they got to work on. I have it in the likes. I'm so shocked that he put this publicly. He said his list, because here's the list officially of what the Spartans got to work on. Ball security, turnover margin, create more explosive plays on offense, sustain drive, score points, pre-snap alignments on defense, stop the run consistently, tackling needs to improve, tighter in coverage, man and zone, pressure on the quarterback, get off the field on third down. That is literally everything. He came out
everything related to defense.
Everything related to football, the Spartans got to get better at. Well, that's great. And we're subjected to Scotty Hazelton. He's not it. We all know it. His scheme is so vanilla that he's trying to protect the fact that these guys can't cover. They can't do it. So you have basics of trying to just lay off and not let anybody get over the top. Well, great. You just let 2 weeks in a row where you let the opponent get into so much rhythm they couldn't stop scoring. And it's disheartening because for a Spartan supporter, pick one thing that you're good at and highlight it. Peyton Thorne's not played well. The reason is, and I understand it's frustrating, the reason is Mel Tucker lost a lot of people to injuries that were key contributors. Obviously, Kenneth Walker really, covered up a lot of things for your offensive line, being able to break plays. He was a home run NFL threat. You can't just discount losing him. And the transfer portal, while it's great, it doesn't replace 5-star talent. And it's still early, and I know people will say it's year 3, but look, it was a COVID year. You're recruiting in a way that's just totally different than everybody expects, and everybody's pointing to the contract that Mel Tucker signed, so there's increased expectations. Look, wins and losses, everybody that kind of knew Michigan State football knew it was going to be a 7-8 win year, knew it was going to be a little bit of a setback. What we don't like is getting your ass kicked and not showing up, not competing, not tackling, not trying. That's a completely different subject. Not, losing a 27-26 game and you fight and you're in the woodshed and you're playing well, that's fine. This is completely hey, wait a minute, maybe we're starting to look at Mel Tucker like Bill Belichick, where college athletes are not having fun, they're getting grinded out, and they're not willing to potentially fight as hard as we would like. And I don't like that. Nobody from Spartan Land has been impressed with the fact that Mel Tucker says, well, I'm a defensive coach, I'm going to take over the secondary. And then the week after, you get your ass kicked in Washington, you don't step it up, you don't give the best effort that you ever give, you're getting your ass kicked by 30 points, get at home? It's unacceptable at the highest level. At least Michigan says, hey, be damned. We don't care if you guys want to see razzle-dazzle with J.J. McCarthy. We don't care. We got a running back in Blake Corum. Run the football, young man, and just do it. Even though he's setting football back 40 years, they still do it effectively. They still do it to the best of their ability. What does Michigan State hang their hat on? It's supposed to be defense, toughness, the woodshed, not getting taken out and bent over. That's the most disheartening part about it is there's no answers. Bro, I'm curious to see. They combined, I think Michigan State could lose to Ohio State and Michigan by 120 points combined. They could get that much dominated because of the fact that it sucks is when you realize that other teams know your weakness and say, let's push the button. Let's push that button and fuck up their secondary. And they do it. And you're like, oh, no. They found the weakness, and they're going to push that button until Michigan State can stop it, and they can't. Usually, you and I solve problems faster than that. We might have little wrinkles here and there, not pushing the right buttons here and there, or relying on things we're not supposed to, but we solve that problem quick. We're like, oh, shit, you do this, I do this, boom, problem solved, never happens again for 200-300 episodes. Michigan State had a problem with defense last year. That's the part that's the most frustrating is you and I target problems, we solve them, and we roll along for months on end with success. The Lions, the Spartans, the Wolverines, when you identify a problem, it just feels like it takes forever to solve it. It takes forever to get moving in the right direction. How do you spend an entire offseason looking at the film of your defense from 2021, and that's what is the product in 2022? It's not enough. It's not enough in any capacity, and I'm not confident this week. I think another loss could be coming, especially with how the teams that Michigan State have been watching film and using the film against the Spartans. There's no guarantee. Michigan right now is on easy street and is playing the hits. Michigan State can't find the arena. They can't find the right way to perform, and it sucks because I love defensive football. I loved how Michigan State attacked teams under D'Antonio when they figured it out. I'm going to be patient. But I know for sure, just based on what I've seen, Scotty Hazelton's not it. He's going to be dismissed. They know. It's obvious that he doesn't have the advanced defensive metrics and schemes to move this along. So that will be the first change. You upgrade significantly, bring the best talent in, a couple more recruiting classes. And remember, guys, let's be a little bit more advanced. The third year of a regime is sneaky tough for coaches because you get a lot of the worst players of the regime that you took over from having to contribute. So it puts a little bit more onus on the coaching staff because damn near D'Antonio was just like, hey, let's just shuffle the deck and figure out, hey, the offensive coach, you now coach the line, the wide receivers coach, now you coach the quarterbacks, and it just went astray. So for the Spartans, it's disappointing, but I do believe that it's going to be turned around in a couple years. You just need time. And hey, if Harbaugh got 7 years, I want to see what Mel Tucker does in year 4 and 5. But this year, you need to upgrade at quarterback. You need to upgrade on every position on defense. And I think you'll start to see it. It's coming. I know. I have a good feeling that Mel Tucker, obviously learning from the NFL and Nick Saban, it's going to be there. But man, because you just realize, you know how hard it is to consistently win 9-10 games? That's why the accomplishment of Nick Saban should be even elevated because of the fact that you built Alabama to be a factory, an NFL factory, to the point where it's just next man up, where you can believe it. Spartans lose 2 guys, season's over. It's disheartening. Am I wrong?
No, absolutely not. It's one of those things too where I think it kind of with the way college football and the landscape is, it feels almost like it's an expectation, right? Like what Mel Tucker did last season was special, was absolutely special. Now, this year, a little bit more of a bit of an issue here with different things. I think what you had last year was you had a guy who was a generational talent in Kenneth Walker, who really covered up a lot of the misgivings of the defense. And I think you have a head coach who's incredibly smart and was able to kind of mask some of the issues that team had. I think right now what you're seeing is you don't have that generational talent. You don't have that guy who can cover up a lot of those mistakes. So everything is like a fresh wound. It's just open and it's oozing and it's bad and it's gross. And you've got to basically completely restructure this defense, and you have to find some help up front on the offensive line. And honestly, those are the big areas of concern. Now, like we're talking about completely revamping an entire defense. That's a big deal. It doesn't happen overnight. And this is a head coach who's now in his 3rd year. So you're starting to see some of his players kind of matriculate in, but you still have a bunch of guys that were left over from the D'Antonio era. I think numbers like 55 guys have left Michigan State's program and went into the portal. I think of the 55 guys, I think it's anywhere between 4 or 5 or 6 guys are on Division I teams. That's not very good. That tells you what you're dealing with at Michigan State right now. That was the level that Mark D'Antonio was recruiting. So you've got to completely flip over the desk. You've got to pull all the drawers out. You got to dump all the papers out, and then you've got to go through and you got to reorganize it all. And I think this year, it's basically a reorganization year. I think this year is going to be a step back, maybe 2 steps back. So next year you can take a step forward, and the year after that you can take another step forward. And it's just kind of where the program is right now. It sucks, but I think Mel Tucker's a really good coach. I think he's got a bit of a bad hand with some of the players he has right now, and I don't think this is going to be a very good season, and I don't think he's going to be able to capitalize and build off of what he did last year. But I think this program takes a few steps back to be much better going forward. Yeah. So I think Scotty Hazelton will get blown out. Scotty Hazelton will probably get blown out before the season ends. Do you anticipate him getting the broom before it ends, or do you think it'll be one of those things where it's done after the season?
It depends. Man, cuz you believe October 8th, Ohio State. That's it. It's coming. It's coming quick. And I think the natives will get restless pretty fast, but I think it would happen after the year. I mean, what are you really going to accomplish? There's so many holes to fill that I don't think he'll do it in the year. It'll be respectful, and he'll move on and upgrade at that position. But I can't wait to see it. I
think it could help galvanize the fan base, because right now Michigan State fans seem a little bit concerned. Yeah, I think a lot of Michigan State fans believed in what you had last year, and I think they believed that was going to become the new reality. Not really recognizing that you had Kenneth Walker, who really cleaned up a lot. Really covered up a lot of messes that were left behind, whether it be with the offensive line or whether it be with the defense not being able to stop anybody. So I think if you were to broom him out earlier, I think it helps galvanize this fan base, and it lets them know that it's not like Mark D'Antonio. Like, you remember what you said. D'Antonio basically just moved around all the chairs on the Titanic. As it was going down, he basically moved a defensive line coach to a quarterback coach to an offensive line coach to a tight ends coach. It was really weird the way he just moved all of his buddies around to keep everybody together. I don't think Mel Tucker does that. I think Mel Tucker understands what it is and what you have to do to compete at a high level and to win. So I think brooming Scotty Hazelton out sooner helps to reinvigorate and helps to galvanize this fan base.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter for great sports takes at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Anywhere you listen and download to your favorite podcast, make sure You type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and you find our daily content as we bring you content related to Michigan, Michigan State, the Lions, Pistons. Now the Wings are firing off in the preseason. Looks like nobody's playing defense. Everybody's scoring goals 2 minutes apart. So it's fun. It's a fun time. We got to look at this Red Wing team. There's some stuff that could be very exciting in weeks ahead with a new head coach. We'll take a look maybe in a couple weeks to do a deep dive as we see how the preseason progresses, because I always enjoy the broadcast. I could talk literally with you 1, 2, 3, 4 hours about football, and this 50 minutes just flew by. And even though we've had great football talks today earlier, this broadcast, very special to me. Thank you, everybody, for downloading the latest edition of Doc and Jock. We'll bring the noise next week, hopefully with a 500 football team with the Detroit Lions.